Welcome to the Underground Dhamma Podcast. This will be episode 5, I believe. And I am joined here with my gracious co-host, Joanna. Hi, Joanna.
Hi.
Hey there. This will be an unplanned episode. We're gonna
go with the flow.
Yes, I was trying to think of a good way to say it, but yes, we're gonna go with the flow. And before the podcast, we were talking about some talks that you were listening to today about this gentleman named Robert Greene, and you found interesting what he was saying. And when you were explaining to me, it sounded pretty interesting as far as the Buddhist perspective. So please, Joanna, tell us what you were learning.
Okay. Well, during our last conversation, I believe I asked you a question and I said, Juan, is desire an emotion? And you said yes, right?
Yes, one of the emotions.
Okay. And then I don't remember what we said after that, but then you said something. You said emotions are the root of all evil.
Yes.
You said, yeah, emotions are the root of all evil. And I was like, whoa. And then I thought about it. And it's true. And then I asked you why. Do you remember? Do you remember how you explained it?
I don't remember how I explained it, but I can tell
remember.
You. Then please remind me.
Okay, so then you started again with the science language, and you said that the reason why emotions are the root of all evil are because emotions are what have allowed humans to survive through centuries and centuries on this earth. And basically, emotions are very, very powerful impulses that will delude us into doing things that help us survive on this planet. And then that was something along the lines of what you were saying.
Yeah, I think in the main thing I mentioned, because now I'm kind of recalling, the main thing I mentioned is I said that all emotions are self-centered. And that's because of evolutionary programming. But yes, go on.
Yeah, can you elaborate? Can you explain? Well, I feel like the reason why this has been on my mind is because I realized I had never really, you know how you could hear something over and over and over?
Yes.
And you're like, yeah, I know. But then one day it just slaps you in the face and you're like, whoa, what?
Yes.
So I was thinking about these ideas, and I realized that, remember how I explained my experience when I was dealing with my clients, when I was serving my clients during my job as a welfare worker. I would have to have interactions with clients that would react very hostile and in a very hostile and aggressive manner when they did not qualify for certain programs, and that I would become emotional and I would feel their anger and I would react to their anger. And it was very, very stressful and very painful.
Yes.
And I remember telling you that I wanted it to stop and I wanted us to just get along and to be happy. And, and I was like, is there a way to do my job without having to feel all this, without being stressed out so much by their reactions, by all these emotions? So I realized me learning breathing meditation is what helped me to detach myself from their emotional reactions by going inside my body and focusing on my breath and my body. And I realized that doing that allowed me to escape the emotional reaction that my body would have had towards within those interactions had I not been aware of what my body was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of like stood back from this experience. I stood back and I kind of looked at the big picture, and I was like, okay, these emotional reactions, these experiences were very emotional and very painful. And people are crazy when they're emotional. I'm crazy when I'm emotional. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
is crazy when they're emotional.
Yes.
And then I was like, yeah, like, and then I started to think about all the crazy things or all the decisions that I have made in my past that I actually don't feel were very good decisions. And I realized I was very emotional during the time that I made those decisions. So, like, yeah, emotions hurt.
Yep. They hurt oneself and they hurt others.
So, when you said that emotions are the root of all evil, I finally like stood back and looked at the big picture and I realized, oh my God, so this is it. This is what Buddhism has been trying to show me all along, that when you are able to master your emotions, to master your mind and your body, by master your mind and your body, what that means is when you are able to understand the way that your mind works when it comes down to the scientific understanding of how your mind works. The reason why science is important is because, like, science is a language that explains uh, the truth about certain realities.
Yes. It sheds more light on it. It helps us understand the causes and conditions that are necessary for events to take place.
Yes. So I realized Buddhism is trying to help me understand my mind and my body so that I can be aware of how emotions affect me and everyone around me and how they create suffering in my life and in everyone else's life.
Yes, that's exactly it. Sadhu.
Okay. So if I am able to actually understand the teachings, which I feel that I'm slowly learning to understand them, I feel that I've come to a point where I understand how the body behaves when it reacts emotionally. I understand it in a different way now. I understand it by standing outside and observing it. Well, actually, standing outside and observing it by looking inside.
Yeah.
And yeah, so by understanding that, now I understand the problem.
Mm. You arrived at the second supernormal reality, the second noble truth.
So, like you said, Bantapunaji said that in order to solve a problem, you must first understand the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we go inside and we actually make an effort to understand the human mind, human psychology, human biology, human evolution, that allows us to understand why our minds and our bodies behave and react and why they are the way they are.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is understanding the problem. Emotions are emotions are not necessarily the problem. How you react to the emotions is the problem. Right, Juan?
Yes. So yeah, you have to understand the emotion, and to understand the emotion, you have to understand the whole organism. And because the emotion is not something that happens on its own, it's a series of antecedents. So this series of antecedents it's an experience of this organism. So yes, the emotions are. I think the emotions are the problem, but that does not mean that we cannot be free. And I think that's where you were heading. That it's about how we respond to the emotions, and because
Yeah. So
obviously we are organisms that have evolved, and when the mammal came into being, the limbic system, which is the emotional centers in the brain that send off signals to let the hormones out into the bloodstream through the endocrine system. This system was part of our evolutionary journey, and as humans, we grew the brain, but we are still mostly dominated by this emotional system. Uh, but yes, go on.
yeah. So I really like the way you explained it. Um, you you explain how humans, the emotions, allow humans to survive.
Yeah, and what I find interesting about it, and it's very obvious to see if someone puts their attention on it, but so evolution wants the organism to continue, survive, and procreate, so the species can continue. And so to do that, it the organism feels pleasure and it feels pain, and all the things that feel pleasurable are the things that will help your survival and your procreation. So what feels pleasurable? uh Food is pleasurable. What else feels pleasurable? Sex feels pleasurable. What else feels pleasurable? High status feels pleasurable. When you get that promotion, when you win that award, when you win that tournament. Me, when I win that Yu-Gi-Oh tournament someday, um, that status, high status that you receive, that's pleasurable. But why? Because that getting a higher status means you can have more picks of mates, and not just one mate, but multiple mates. And that's what evolution planned out. It made the stuff that is pleasurable, it programmed it to be pleasurable, because that's going to lead you to act, to be motivated to go after that pleasure. That's where the desire is the emotion. It programmed desire in you. And that's something that's very obvious to see when you realize, oh yeah, you're right, everything that's pleasurable is usually these things that, if we think about it from a strictly evolutionary standpoint, yeah, that that does tend to help the organism survive and procreate. But yeah, that's what I find interesting.
Yeah, and so I was telling you earlier today that I was listening to a podcast about one of Robert Greene's conversations.
Mm-hmm.
He was having a conversation with another speaker. I can't remember his name, but Robert Greene was explaining how humans evolved through the assistance of emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and emotions are they're very powerful, and they are what allow us to survive throughout history. But the problem is, like, we no longer need them.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Unlike the other animals, because if we look at the other animals have to eat, other animals sleep, other animals have fear, other animals have sex, other animals do all these things that the human does. But the one thing that differentiates the human is the ability to think and reason out.
Yes, that's what he said too.
I heard Bante Puniji say it, so I guess they were both on the same page.
And also, he was saying that we are now in an era where we don't really need these emotions to survive. If anything, they actually work against us. They create more problems than anything in this world. And they make it more difficult for society and for people to get along because the average human is not able to control their emotions. Like usually, and then that's when he started talking about marketing. He said that marketers, they know human psychology. They know how human psychology works so well that they know exactly what they have to do, what little tricks they have to do to convince people to buy things. So in a sense, they use the human mind against them. They use their understanding of the human mind against them to manipulate them. And it works.
Yeah, it's so funny. The Buddha found out how the mind works and he awakened. These people learn how the mind works and they're trying to make a buck, which is really the motivation of emotions.
Yeah, so they're not awakened yet. But I just thought it was very interesting how you know, the studies, they use science against humans. They use science against the humans so that they can make financial profits. So imagine if the masses of people were to learn how the mind works and were able to understand what how emotions work, how emotions control us. Robert Greene was saying that emotions control so many of our decisions without our awareness.
Oh yeah, that's the avijja.
Avijja.
Avijja is unconsciousness or insentient, meaning you're not you're not conscious of it.
Would you say that that is kind of what the Matrix is?
Yeah, the matrix, which is basically how this process of perception and cognition creates what we perceive as reality, that this matrix is being created, constructed by the same organism that perceives it, and we're unconscious of it, and therefore we think that matrix actually is real and is existing outside, and that we're
Oh,
part of this matrix, but we don't understand that we are the architect.
kind of like how humans believe that emotions are real.
Yeah, not only do they believe they're real, they believe that that's who they are. That's me. I'm the anger. I'm the sadness. I'm the lust.
Okay, so I was trying to understand that idea of the Matrix. And when I was thinking about the emotions and how humans believe emotions are real, they believe in emotions so strongly that they never stop to question. I mean, I wouldn't say they never do, but I'm speaking from my own experience and from the observations I made throughout my life amongst people that I have personally known and grown up with, or people that I've interacted on a daily basis throughout work or whatever, you know. But I have seen many situations in which I myself have been convinced that my emotions are real and that what these emotions are telling me are the truth. And then later on, when I'm calm and relaxed and I start to see things differently and I realize I was wrong.
Yep. That's so accurate. I mean, it's like Bhante Punaji has always used this analogy of a pot that is boiling. You know, it's not until that boiling pot, not until we turn off the fire, and then wait for that boiling pot to cool down, that we can start to think accurately. Because what's happening is that we're getting flooded with hormones, and these hormones are activating so many different areas of the body to behave and act. And you say that you, when you're in that moment, you think it's real. It sure as hell makes you believe that it's real, so that you will act, because you know that perceived danger, the body may not know that it's just a perceived danger. It wants you to, it wants you to act as if it's a real danger. And not until that the body metabolizes the hormones in your bloodstream, that you will finally start to think rationally and reason out. And that's what that's what you just described.
Yeah. it's a pretty fascinating topic, if you stop to think about it. And I guess sometimes I just like daydream about what it would be like if I didn't allow my emotions to control me, if I had more power over my emotions.
Mm. If you had more virya over your
Yes.
emotions.
Yes. So then Robert Greene was talking about that. He was saying that humans are starting to become more aware through science. Humans are learning to understand the mind better. And because of that, more and more people are starting to understand that the emotions, how to reason, how to use reason over emotions, how to make decisions through reasoning versus through emotions.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. I mean, what 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 is the language that has allowed us to properly transmit the message that the Buddha tried to transmit? It has been the language of science. So what you just said makes perfect sense to me, that because of all this scientific knowledge that we're learning, we're able to understand the antecedents, the conditions that lead for experience to happen. And I mean, that's what the Buddha was talking about so long ago. And yeah, it's very, very important and very fascinating.
Yeah.
So how did the talk go? Did he what was the did you finish the talk? Was there an endpoint that he was heading to?
Um, the end point, I feel basically the main idea he was trying to explain was that a lot of the things that we think are real are not. And that if we
Mm,
take the time to really understand our minds, science, our minds, and um, how they work, how our minds work, then we would start to be able, we will begin to question what we think is what we see through the emotions. We will begin to question our emotions, and we will start to think differently and make decisions differently, more soundly, through the use of reason versus through the use of emotions.
mm,
And then he was also talking about how most people in life, they do jobs that they don't like, and they kind of like fall asleep. They're like on autopilot doing these jobs, these mindless jobs that they don't really enjoy, because they're so afraid that if they don't do these jobs, they're not going to find a way to make a living. And so they think, oh, I have to survive. So they do what everyone else does, and they go to these jobs that they don't really stop to think about, is this the most efficient way to make a living? Do I really enjoy this? And if I don't, how can I make a plan? How can I think ahead? Oh, he was saying people always think about now. They don't really plan ahead. They don't plan into the future. They always think about what it is they need now to survive, you know? And then because of that mindset, people limit themselves. They limit themselves in the quality of life. And then he said that the reason why this is so important to understand and to be aware of is because humans, we, due to our modern advancement in science, we don't normally interact, or we don't normally come into uh, contact with situations where we see death around us. He said back in the day,
mm-hmm.
people would see death every day. It was an everyday daily thing. People had to kill animals on a daily basis to cook food, to make meals, and to survive. And nowadays, we just go to a grocery store and we buy our food, and we don't even think twice about the animals that had to die in order for us to have this food. We don't really think about the people that are dying from illnesses because we don't see it.
Yeah,
Even during the COVID pandemic, like, I haven't seen anyone. I haven't seen a single dead body in person.
that's true. And so many people died. It's
Yes.
it's true. Bhante Punaji used to say that as well. He said, "Look, people don't even see death anymore. As soon as someone dies, a team comes in, they hide the body, put it in a bag, and so that no one will see it, and just sweep it away. And it's true. And I've talked to people who like my sister and my mother, they were in Mexico when my dad died, and me and my brother were here, and they saw the dead body, and they saw how shocking that is. That's how shocking it is to see an organism that was alive, walking and talking, and now it's dead. Perception gone, metabolism stopped, body heat dissipating. It's 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 like I didn't get to see it, so but I imagine it's like snapping out of a dream, like, oh crap. It's like a slap to wake you up.
Yes.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's true. We sweep it away. In the Buddhist meditation, one of the meditation techniques, one of the in the Mahatanhasankhaya Sutta, the great discourse on introspection, one of the practices is used to be for the monks to go to the charnel grounds where they would take the bodies and pile them up, and the animals would come and eat them. And they would go and they would sit down and watch the body decompose, like day after day after day, and they would see it. First it looks like a normal human being, and then it gets bloated, and then like liquids start oozing out, and then all the way till it's just a bunch of scattered bones everywhere. And yeah, that's I'm sure that has a effect, because we, like you said, we're only thinking about now, and that probably has to do with like we want everything as instant. We want instant food, instant internet connection, instant everything. We even want instant awakening. But it, these things, these realities of life, of death, aging, and sickness, like these things, you're right, we don't really get to see, and when we see it, we don't want to see it. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. And he was saying, Robert Greene was saying that because we're not normally exposed to death the way that society used to be back, before modern times, humans used to really think about it.
Yes.
And he said that because of that lack of exposure to death and the fragileness of human life,
Mm-hmm.
he said that we take life for granted, and we choose paths in our lives. We choose jobs or careers that are really don't make us feel alive. We're
Mm-hmm.
just doing it to survive. And we think, oh, maybe one day, I'll do what I really like. And he said that you should act with urgency and do the things that you really make you alive. He said, make the most of the time you have now, because you don't know how much time you have left.
Yeah, absolutely. The Buddha said that we're all living with a sword hanging over our head, and we don't know when it's going to drop. So I got to go win that tournament. And then become a monk and become awakened. um, but yeah, no, that's very powerful. I that this Robert Greene. So he's written in 1998. He wrote the famous book called the 48 Laws of Power. Then he wrote other books. I read that book, but it was before Buddhism, before I got into Buddhism, and I remember it was pretty good. And what I found interesting was that he used a lot of historical figures to make his points, which I thought was cool. But I don't recall anything like super normal or about like from a Buddhist standpoint. But that was because I didn't know any Buddhist standpoints back then. But then he wrote like another book, like the Art of Mastery, and then the Law of Human Nature. And so this guy is a pretty interesting guy, but I haven't come across his ideas since I've gotten into the Dhamma. So I'm glad that you brought this up. It's very like eye-opening what he's getting at. It's very true.
Yeah. Juan, what was that sutta we were discussing last week?
Last week we discussed this sutta where this Brahmin student Metagu was asking questions to the Buddha.
What was the name of the sutta again?
I need to look it up, but it's like Metagu something something. I forget off the top of my head, but it basically translates to the questions of from Metagu.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me see.
Did you was something on your mind about the sutta?
Yes, I was trying to understand how the analogy that the Buddha used to describe how consciousness, or how, well, I'm kind of like hesitant to explain it because I know I'm probably not gonna do a good job.
Actually, so we discussed that sutta not on the podcast. I think we discussed it on the Zoom meditation class that we go to, and then we discussed it on our own in a conversation. But you're talking about the Mahatanhasankhaya Sutta.
Yes.
It's Majjhima Nikaya 38.
Mahakaya.
Maha Tanha, so great, and then Tanha is emotion. Sankhaya is like destruction of the great destruction of emotion.
Mahatanhasankhaya.
Yep, you got it.
Sutta.
Yeah, so basically for the listeners out there, there was this guy, this monk. He was known as Sati the Fisherman's son, and he was going around telling everyone that it is this perception that goes from this body to the next body, to the next body, to the next body, from life to life, and that's what the Buddha was teaching. And then the monks heard him, his fellow monks in the spiritual life heard him, and they said, "No, Sati, don't say such things. Don't pollute or soil the teachings of the Buddha." And then he goes, "No, this is what he taught." And so the monk said, they just stopped talking to him and went to the Buddha and told him what was happening. And the Buddha said, "All right, call him, tell him the teacher is calling." And so Sati goes to the Buddha, and the Buddha says, "Are you going around saying that it is this perception that goes from life to life, from body to body?" And he goes, "Yes." And then the Buddha goes, "What is this perception that you speak of that is going from body to body, life to life?" And he goes, "Oh, it is this perception that feels pleasure and pain and experiences the results of good and bad actions from the past." And then the Buddha goes, "You fool, when have you ever heard me talk in this way? When have you ever heard me teach in this way? Have I not explained to you that perception comes due to the presence of the necessary conditions? And without the necessary conditions, perception can't come into being." So basically, the Buddha was yelling at him because he's this Sati, and most people think, because what is perception going from body to body, life to life? What does that sound like? That sounds like a soul, what people call a soul. And people call this because they want to believe in existence. They can't even fathom that there's no such thing as existence. So they create this idea called a soul. And the what Sati is saying, instead of calling it a soul, he just called it perception. He was using the word vijnana, and he called it perception. And he doesn't even know what perception is from a neurobiological standpoint. He doesn't know what perception is or how it comes about. So he just, since he doesn't understand from a neurological neuroscience standpoint what perception is, he's thinking, yeah, this perception, it goes from this life to the next life. And he doesn't understand that there has to be conditions to create that perception to come into being, which go ahead.
And that's where the analogy comes in of the flame.
Yeah.
Okay, so the problem with me was that I've heard this analogy many, many times. The analogy of the flame, where the Buddha says, when a flame burns out, where does the fire go? And I think the answer of his student was, I don't know.
He says you cannot say.
Yeah, like basically saying, I don't know, right?
It's basically saying that is not a valid question. It's not a valid question. It's not a reasonable question to ask. Where did the flame go? All you can say is that the fuel has finished.
That's what the Buddha said, right? The Buddha said it's not a valid question.
Yes.
Or, okay.
That's pretty much what he was saying.
Okay. So I just think what's kind of funny is that I never really stopped to think about why is he using a flame as an analogy until you explained it to me, Juan, and you were saying that the reason why he's using a flame as to represent a human life is because I feel like we kind of like overlook the little details about what it takes for a human body to stay alive.
Yes.
Like literally speaking.
Yes.
Literally, a human body, in order for a human body to stay alive, it must consume food.
Yes.
And in order for the body to continue to survive, it must metabolize that food.
Yes. Turn it into energy.
Yes. And then it must also reject any waste in order to maintain the body.
It's
the body's well-being.
It's a building up process and a breaking down process.
Yeah. And then I think you said it, you tried explaining it to me in how many different ways?
It was like 5 different ways by the end of it. I was yelling at you.
This was you. This was you.
I was like, Joanna, you have to understand that this, and this,
This is how you were saying, Joanna, you have to understand. And you were like slapping your hands every time you were saying something.
Yes.
And then finally I got it. And I was like, oh,
yes,
I get it now. Like literally you're talking about like how the human body is like a little coal fire.
Yes.
Like in order for this body to stay alive, it must eat. It must burn this fuel.
Yes.
The same way that a train must burn fuel in order for it to keep moving.
Yes, exactly. And that's why the Buddha always when he yelled at Sati, I yelled at you like the Buddha yelled at Sati the Fisherman, literally. and I wasn't angry, right?
No, it's because you were very passionate about trying to help me understand the idea.
Because it's such an important idea.
The concept.
So that's a good, and I'm glad you brought that up because, people, when they hear the sutta, they're like, oh my God, the Buddha yelled? I thought he doesn't
That was
angry.
actually my reaction. I said, Juan, the Buddha actually yelled? And then you said, Joanna, if I'm trying to help you understand something, let's pretend I'm your mother. If I'm trying to tell you, Joanna, don't touch the stove or you'll burn yourself. Do you think I'm really going to tell you calmly, Joanna, don't touch the stove or you'll burn yourself? I'm going to tell you in a very urgent and shocking manner because I want to make sure you understand not to touch the stove so that you don't burn your hand.
Yes. So that's exactly what the Buddha was doing. And that's what I was doing with you to explain it. And right after, the Buddha yelled at Sati for having such a erroneous and distorted view, especially not only just having that view yourself, but also teaching others this distorted view. You're causing the downfall of not only yourself, but others. And then right after he said that, he said, like, haven't I told you that everything is due to the necessary conditions? Nothing comes out of, nothing just comes up randomly. It needs those conditions. And then he starts talking about the 4 foods. The 4 foods are the 4 aharas. That's how you say food in Pali. And I believe that's how you say food possibly in Sinhalese, ahara.
Ahara.
Yeah, we'll ask the Bantes next time we see him.
Okay.
But the Buddha talked about these four foods, and that's a very important thing. Oh, yes. So it is these four aharas that are very important. And Joanna, you know how everybody talks about karma and rebirth?
Yes.
Everyone focuses on karma and rebirth. And even like Western people, when they start to learn about Buddhism, they think, oh, I need to learn about karma and rebirth. Because here in the West, we don't think about that. So I got to learn about karma and rebirth because that's what Buddhism is teaching. But no, the Buddha is not trying to teach about karma and rebirth. Excuse me. He did mention karma, actions, good and bad actions. And he has talked about rebirth, the different planes of existence where, the hell realms, the heaven realms, the animal realms, the ghost realms, the realms of the Titans, all these realms. So yeah, he did mention that, but he's not teaching karma and rebirth. And when he's teaching the deepest aspects of the Dhamma, he never talks about karma and rebirth. He goes to immediately he goes to the four aharas. Even Mahasariputta, who was the top disciple in wisdom, when he gave the discourse on the harmonious perspective, he goes straight from kama, good and bad kama, the kusala and akusala actions, which are kusala is good and bad, akusala is bad. Right after the good and bad actions, he goes straight to the four aharas right after. And then right after the four aharas, he goes into paticca samuppada. So this is very important. And Joanna, I think you remember the first of the four foods, right?
Yes. Palpable food.
Palpable food, which palpable means just like something you can physically touch. And yes, palpable food, because so four foods means four types of feels that are feeling the activity that we call existence. Because existence is not something that is static. Existence is not, when people think, what did Bhante Kalita tell you that people think existence is, Joanna?
Permanent.
Yes, they think existence means a permanent existence. And that's an erroneous perspective. That's basically what Sati was saying. Like, there's this perception that goes from this life to the next life to the next life, and this is a permanent existence pretty much. But that's what people think the soul is. But that's foolish. It's foolish. That just means you do not understand what happens, what we call experience, how experience comes about. You do not understand that you're an organism in an environment, and you don't understand what life is. People think that life is something mystical, but life is literally a building up process and breaking down process, like you were mentioning earlier. So
yes, like the coal, the burning coals in the train.
yeah,
The burning coals that keep the train moving.
yeah, it's fueling it. It's fueling that activity of the moving train. So, and then once the food of the coals stops burning, what happens to the train?
It stops moving.
It stops. Just like I mentioned my father, when he died, there was no more perception, there was no more metabolism, there was no more body heat. That's like a train that stopped. So this, what we call existence, is really an activity fueled by four foods. And the first food that is fueling this activity is palpable food, because literally the food we ingest in food and drink fuels this body. So that's the first food. The second food is fueling the mental part of the existence, which here, when we say existence, we just mean a temporary set of conditions that are based on these four fuels. So
yeah, a temporary train.
yes, a temporary moving train. That's perfectly said. So the first part, the physical, palpable food is fueling the physical portion of this temporary moving train. The second food is moving the mental portion of this moving train. And that is the second food is cognition, pasa. Cognition here means it means the activity of the six senses coming together in the to up. So all the senses getting triggered, getting information, and transmitting that information in an electrochemical signal, sending it up the spinal cord up to the brain. And the brain uses all that information to cognize. So here, the fuel is the activity of sense information from all six senses consolidating into a cognitive interpretation. So that's the second food. And then the third food, Joanna, what is it?
Thinking and emotion.
Thinking and emotion. Here, this is one. Why is it one? Why did the Buddha mention one? In Pali, he said, mano sanchetana. Mano sanchetana, all one word, but it is made of three different words. One word is mano, which is thinking. We've discussed mano when we talked about the three activities of the mind. The three activities of the mind are the perception, then the cognition, the thinking portion, which cognition is part of the thinking, and then it is the mood, which is usually emotional. You know, we started this podcast talking about Robert Greene and how where everyone's dominated by emotions. That's because everyone's mood is usually emotional. They rarely are in a tranquil mood. So usually when we think of chitta, the mood, we usually just think of it as an emotional state. So here in the third food, the Buddha used the word mano san chetana. So mano is thinking. San is kind of like the link between the thinking and the second word, which is chetana. And chetana here is similar to chitta, but chitta, we said, was the mood, which can be emotional or tranquil. When it is emotional, it literally moves and it causes you to move. And so chetana is the chitta moving, which a good translation would be motivation. Motivation literally means what caused you to move. And it's usually the emotion that causes you to move. So that's why here the Buddha is talking about thinking and emotion. It's mano san chetana. And the reason it's together is because the cognitive psychologists now are realizing that it is based on what you think that triggers your emotion. Your thinking will trigger how you interpret the situation cognitively will lead to the feeling, which triggers the emotion. And so how are they dealing with emotional problems? They deal with them by having the patient choose and question their thoughts. Question them. Is this thought accurate? Is it good for me? If it is not accurate and not good for me, then let me replace it. And so that's why the second food fueling this activity of the moving train is the thinking and emotion. And then what is the fourth food, Joanna?
Perception.
Perception. So perception is the basis of all mental activity. The mental activity, which really is just a reaction of the organism to environmental stimulation, this mental activity is this process of perception is what starts this mental activity and goes on to cause to this process of perception is the antecedent to cognition and thinking and emotion. So these are the four foods. When we think of existence, Joanna, when we think of existence, we're thinking of these four activities, basically. The activity of the body, the activity of cognition, the activity of thinking and emotion, and the activity of perception. But we don't see these as separate activities. We just see as me. It's me, me and Joanna.
So that's the thing. Like, I feel like generally, I never really stopped to think about what's going on in this body that I have, uh, and what it has to do in order for me to continue experiencing life. So, this sutta that you're discussing, the Buddha kind of like gives this monk a reality check, and he tells him, like, no, you fool, where have you been all this time? Haven't you been listening? This is not, this is not, your perception does not move on infinitely through reincarnation. That is not the way it works. The way it works is through through the four foods.
That
He said everything is due to the necessary conditions. So he's telling him, hey man, you're not your awareness is not necessarily going to reincarnate. In order for that to happen, must all the necessary conditions must be present in order
that's
for
right.
you to reincarnate. And he's saying that the four foods are part of the necessary conditions.
Yes, and we must remember that there is no reincarnation. So the reason that Sati thought there was reincarnation is because he thought that this perception is independent of conditions. And yes, so the Buddha told him, "You fool! You don't understand that everything is due to the presence of the necessary conditions. So this is why you have this erroneous perspective of reincarnation." And then after this, Joanna, he goes on to talk about the paticca samuppada.
Yeah, which we've discussed before. And
Yes.
it starts off with the Four Noble Truths.
Well, yes, if you really want to understand the paticca samuppada, you definitely have to understand the Four Noble Truths. And because paticca samuppada, it literally just is telling you how experience is constructed.
Yes.
And that's so first the Buddha tells you that, hey, there's no existence here. You're talking about existence, Sati, and there's no existence here. There's no existence. There's only the 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 four foods that fuel this activity. And all activities start and stop. There's no activity that is forever. And all activities start and stop due to the presence of the necessary conditions. If you stop eating, then you probably will, this activity of the moving train will stop. You need every one of these conditions in order for this activity to go on. But yes, this is this is what was so interesting to discuss, and it's something that is so obvious and so close to people's perception, but we just completely miss it.
Okay. So I think after the Buddha mentions the four foods and the four aharas, and he explains how the body must have these certain foods in order to have to support an awareness or to support an activity of the mind. So basically, in order for a human to function as a human and be aware and alive in this world, they have to have these four nourishments: the food, the cognition, the thinking and the motion, and perception. If these four nourishments are being consistently provided to this human body, then they will continue to exist and to live in this world through an act as an activity, like a moving train that with burning coals that are being refueled. But I think the reason why it's confusing, Juan, is because the Buddha was telling this guy, no, there's no such thing as reincarnation. But then the Buddha's telling him, hey, no, the Buddha's telling him there's no such thing as reincarnation. because of the way that because of the way he explained um, the activity of the mind. He thinks that it just moves on and on and on infinitely, but that's not the way it works. The way it works is if the necessary conditions are present, then the activity of the mind will continue. So once the body dies, it doesn't necessarily mean that the activity of the mind will continue.
That's right.
During what conditions? What are the necessary conditions for the activity of the mind to continue in another life?
So it needs, so when you use one candle flame to light another candle, that means that flame passed from one candle to the other candle. It's not the same flame, but it's also not completely different. That all you need is a new candle. And for us, we need a new nervous system, which is provided within an organism. So right now we are recording, right, Joanna?
Yes.
And we're using this computer to record, right?
Yes.
Then I'm going to upload this recording, which is an activity, and I'm going to upload it on our YouTube channel. And it's going to play everything that we're saying right now in the quote unquote present. Everything we're saying right now is going to be replayed in someone else's computer. Now, is that the same activity that's happening right now that we're recording?
Pretty much.
And but it's now it's not live, but it's pretty much the same activity. It's a reproduction. So reproduction means that it doesn't mean that there was something living, like we are not living within this computer and then went on to live within whoever's computer is listening. We're not living in Dave's computer who's listening now. Speaking in the future when he listens to this episode, we're not living in the computer. There's no existence that is happening in this computer now that we're using to record, nor in the computer for whoever listens to this episode. Correct?
Correct. Oh, by the way, I wanted to say that Robert Greene his voice sounds exactly like Dave's voice.
You serious?
Yes, I am so serious.
Wow.
You got to hear him. I was like, oh my God, it sounds just like Dave. But anyways.
Dave is our friend from the temple.
Yeah. Dave's voice is very, it sounds just like Robert Greene's voice. It's like Dave was talking.
I'm going to listen. That's so funny. But so what's needed? So what happens? All right. So we're going to talk about something that I don't think the Buddha talked about in the sutta, or maybe he does, but not exactly, not outright how I'm going to say it. But this is how I learned it from Bhante Puniji. But just how we are recording this, what we call this podcast, and then we're going to upload it to YouTube, and then YouTube's going to send out signals that whoever has the appropriate antenna, meaning device, can reproduce this signal that got sent out. And Joanna, let me ask you right now, so there's no confusion, and not by you, I mean by the listeners, is a signal existing?
Yeah. Yes.
No. A signal is an activity.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. A signal is not an entity traveling.
You mean, is the signal permanent? No, it's not.
Yes. So, because when people think of existence, they think of entities, right?
They think like souls. They think souls are permanent, but they're not. Nothing is permanent.
So when we listen to Bhante Puniji through our computer, is Bhante Puniji inside the computer talking to us?
No.
No.
I wish.
It's a reproduction of an activity. Because, we can go further than that, Joanna. When Bhante Puniji was sitting in front of me talking, was Bhante Puniji existing? The answer is no.
Only temporarily.
He was never existing. He was never existing. All it was an activity. And yes, this activity was temporary. So even when Bhante Puniji, he said it himself in one of his talks, he said, here, you're sitting in front of me, listening to my voice. You think that there's someone in here existing, but there's no one in here existing, he said. This is...
Juan, let's just remind our
I think you cut out. What'd you say?
in the American language, it's translated as to have a permanent, for something to be permanent, or for one to be permanent. So that's why you're asking me, do we exist? And you're basically asking me, are we permanent? And I'm telling you, no, we're not.
Yes, but just saying that is not enough. I feel like smacking my hand right now.
You can smack your hand.
No, I'm gonna drop the mic if I do. Literally, we have to get this through our heads. When we see, quote unquote, somebody, like an organism in front of us, there's no existing entity in there. There's no one there. When I'm going to give a talk at the temple, or that's the plan, I'm going to give a talk at the temple on our retreat coming up. When the people see this walking, talking monkey in front of them, there's no Juan there. There's no one there, and there's no Juan there. You can say both. There's no Juan there. There's no one there. It's all just an activity. It's an activity. And so we have to understand this. So once we understand that it's just an activity, then we can go on to talk about what the Buddha called rebirth, which here rebirth is not reincarnation. It's not transmigration. Reincarnation, people think, is where the soul leaves a body and goes into another body. It incarnates into a body, and then when it leaves the body, it discarnates. So, and then when both activities happen, it's reincarnation. That's not what is happening when the Buddha talks about rebirth. When the Buddha is talking about rebirth, he's talking about reproduction. So when, like, we can just look at a very basic example. When a male and female human procreate, what happens? Well, not always, but what can happen?
The embryo is an embryo is created in the female fetus.
So
in the female uterus.
There's reproduction. Then we can call that reproduction, right?
Yes.
Now, is that reproduction literally the same thing as the mother or father? Did the mother and father go into the embryo?
No.
They reproduce an activity, reproduce a new activity. Can you say that?
Yes.
Yes. And then not only that, when that embryo is developing, at about 6 months is when the nervous system starts to develop enough so that it can become an antenna. So what is this antenna? Similar to the people listening to this podcast are listening to this because they have a device that has an antenna that can pick up the signal provided by what we call YouTube to reproduce this voice that you're hearing right now in your device. That's literally an antenna that is reproducing an activity. So now we can talk about rebirth. Now we understand about activity. We have a knowledge about how reproduction within signals and electronic devices. Well, what is the body besides an electronic device? We're an electrical system. So when someone has an emotion, they give off an electromagnetic wave. When someone has an emotion, they give off an electromagnetic wave. We even have machines that can measure the electricity within the body.
Wow.
EEG machines.
Yeah, and then there's electricity in the heart. The heart cannot function without electricity.
Yeah. So that's showing that there's no existing entity here. There's no Juan inside the body that we label Juan. There's no Joana within the body that we label Joana. All there is activity. So at the moment of death, most people are, Joanna, would you say that most people are emotional?
Oh, yes.
Perfect. So at the moment of death, are they going to probably be emotional?
At the moment of death, yes.
Yes.
Because they're scared.
Yes. So, and I mentioned that all emotion is an electromagnetic wave that gets sent off. So at the moment of death, at the point where there's no more perception or no more perception continuing within the organism, that means that at the moment of death, there is one last electromagnetic signal that goes off, boom, gets sent out, similar to how the YouTube server sent out a signal that is going to be reproduced as episode 5 of the Underground Dhamma Podcast and all our listeners' devices. So at the moment of death, an electromagnetic signal gets sent out, which was the emotion, the last emotion experience. That electromagnetic signal is now flying. And wherever that signal needs an appropriate antenna to pick it up. And that appropriate antenna comes in the form of an embryo, a fetus that develops to the point where the nervous system is functional. And due to the necessary conditions, an antenna in the form of a nervous system that is now functional, it needs the perfect antenna to pick up that particular signal. And then, boom, that antenna, that nervous system, around 6 months of the fetus, it picks up that signal. And now we cannot say that, like, if I die and I give off that, if I say, oh no, I'm dying, oh, I don't want to die, and boom, I die. And then I send off that signal, and then that signal gets picked up and reproduced with a new nervous system. Now there's perception available in the form of the fetus around 6 months. We can't say that's Juan. We can't say that I traveled through the air and now I'm inside the fetus, like waiting to get old again. We can't say that, but we can also we can see how that signal was sent off by the organism that we label Juan. So it's not completely different, but it's not the same either. It's just a reproduction, similar to when we put a paper in a copier machine, it reproduces it, but it's a different paper now. There's 2 papers now. That's what's happening. That's rebirth. If you understand how an electrical signal gets picked up by your TV, by your computer, by your whatever electronic device, and reproduces whatever the activity is, whether it's a song or a show or whatever, if you understand how that works, then you understand how rebirth works. And this is what Sati did not understand. What do you think?
Yes. Juan is not absolute.
There is no Juan. Only an activity that turns their head when they hear that sound, Juan. And why do I turn my head? Because I was programmed to turn my head and to think that that's me. We were all programmed, but we're foolishly programmed. There's no Juan here. There's no one here. There's no Juan here. There's no Joana here. There's just an activity, a beautiful activity, which experiences pain. And so what's the difference between the Buddha when the Buddha, what we label the Buddha's body, when that body stops its activity called perception? What is the difference between that body at the moment of death and the body we label Juan at the moment of death? The difference is that the Buddha does not experience emotions anymore. He has destroyed emotions, because that's the name of this sutra. Is called the Mahatanhasankhaya Sutta, the great destruction of emotion. The difference is that the Buddha at the moment of death, not only is there no emotion, he's traveling through the jhanas at the moment of death. So that means that at the moment of death, when perception in the body stops, it does not send out an electromagnetic signal in the form of an emotion. And since it does not send out an electromagnetic signal, because he does not experience emotions again, There will never be a birth again. That's why the Buddha says, there's this famous phrase, when not only the Buddha, but when any person becomes an arahant, becomes a Buddha themselves, they say now birth has ended. They don't say now existence has ended. They say now birth has ended. Why? Because they don't experience emotion anymore. And how does that translate to no more birth? That means at the moment of death, there will not be an electromagnetic signal that gets sent off again to be picked up by another antenna. Let it all sink in.
Yeah, he turned off the flame permanently.
Yeah. And so that, since the flame burned up all its fuel, it can no longer start another flame. It can no longer spark another flame.
Juan, how much time do we have?
We could probably talk for maybe like 10 more minutes, or unless we prolong it. I don't what did you have in mind?
No, I just wanted to make sure we didn't go over 40 minutes.
Oh, no. We're good. I'm keeping track of it. But yeah, so that's pretty much, if you want to know what else happens in the Mahatanhasankhaya Sutta on this channel, I gave a talk at the temple, which I recorded with not the best audio, but you can listen. And I go over the whole sutra. It's probably like an hour and 40 minutes or something to that effect. So if anyone's listening and wants to know how this sutra ends, this Mahatanhasankhaya Sutta, go ahead and watch that video. It should be like the third video on this channel. But yeah.
Juan, remember when you were telling me that our state of mind is constantly fluctuating throughout our life?
Yeah.
Like an infinite number of times throughout our life. And that the Buddha, who he was when he was young, his state of mind when he was young was different compared to his state of mind when he was awakened.
Yes.
Excuse me. And you mentioned that he was actually in nirvana when he was awakened. That means that he was in heaven. And then I said, how could he have been in heaven if he was here on this earth? And then you said,
now just heaven is not the appropriate word, but
what word did you use?
He was in the state of mind called nirvana.
Okay. But so I said, okay, nirvana is like heaven. And you said, yes. Right?
I don't recall, but I can see what you're saying. And yes, it feels like heaven. It's like the supreme peace, the supreme happiness.
And you said that depending on how you interpret how you interpret your experience on earth, your life could be hell.
Yeah. So I said that some people will try to interpret the different realms of existence as different realms of mental existence.
Oh, maybe we should talk about that in a different episode, because that's a whole different story.
Yeah, it gets pretty deep. So yeah, so what you're trying to say is that, there's people on this earth walking around, but in their head, there might be experiencing a type of hell or a type of heaven.
Yes.
And yeah, that's true. But we have to remember that nirvana is beyond beyond all categories. So that's why I was a little hesitant to call it heaven. Nirvana is just the end of all suffering. It's the end of all existence.
The end of all conflict.
The end of all conflict, yeah. Pure harmony.
That's pretty much what the Buddha had mastered. He had mastered how to live a harmonious life by avoiding conflict.
That's correct.
And by living skillfully.
That's right.
Making skillful decisions and living harmoniously with his community, and maintaining awareness of not only his thoughts, but his words, his actions, and how they affected everyone around him.
Yes, that's correct. And that's what he was. That's why he was so extraordinary, and that's why any arahant that wakes up, any individual that becomes an arahant, which, remember, people, if no one knows what arahant means, ara is like a bond or a chain, like a chain, and hant is to break the chain. So breaker of chains. An arahant broke through the chains. What kind of chains? The chains of existence. There's 10 chains to existence. We're tied to 10 chains of existence. In Pali, it's called samyojana. Samyojana. And there's 4 levels of awakening. One is a stream enterer, sotapanna. One is a once returner, sakadagami. One is a non-returner, anagami, and one is an arhat, full breaker of chains. And the first level, sotapanna, only breaks the first 3 chains. The second level, once returner, breaks the first 3 chains and then weakens the 4th and 5th. The anagami, one non-returner.
Whoa. Sorry, you said the samyojana means the chains of existence.
Yes.
And then sotapanna is a person who breaks the first 3 chains,
Yes.
which are
We go into it's going to be a long episode, but it's
okay. No, you don't have to say them. What's the next one?
sakadagami, once returner, breaks dagami.
That's a once returner.
And they break the first 3 chains and then weaken the 4th and 5th. And then there's anagami. And that is a non-returner. They go to the imageless realm, and there they until their energy runs out, then they reach nirvana. That's where the idea of the Amitabha Buddha, who's in the pure lands, comes from.
What's the Amitabha Buddha?
It's this idea of this bodhisattva who, wishes all beings to come to his pure land so that they can awaken easily, because it's too hard to awaken here. I know that's a crude description, but
it's too hard to awaken in this world because of the emotions, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can't hope for someone to take you somewhere else. So there's no instant soup for awakening.
No, I just think it's interesting that you're comparing this world to other worlds, and how here it's very difficult to awaken because of the emotions. Is that why?
Yeah, you can say that, but remember, you're not getting, the only way to get there is to break through the emotions, which is the first 5 chains of existence.
Oh my gosh.
And then the last one is the arahant. The arahant not only broke the first 5, but then the arahant also broke the last 5.
What? There's 10 of them?
Yeah, there's 10 chains to existence.
Whoa, we got to do a podcast on the 10 chains of existence.
All right, we'll do the next one on that. I can do some research as far as like making sure I can transmit the messages properly. But I think this is enough for episode 5. I think we're going to start shortening it a little bit if we can. And then we might have an extra bonus episode this week, Joanna. I know we won't say what we're talking about.
Oh, yes. It'll be, we may or we may not.
Yes.
We do not know. Only time will tell. It'll be a surprise.
Yes. If the necessary conditions are there, we'll do it.
Yes, if the necessary conditions are there, it'll happen.
That's right. So with that said, I guess any last words, Joanna?
Thank you so much, Juan. Again, for your wisdom, sharing your wisdom and understanding, and for everything.
My pleasure. I'm just someone who's singing. I'm not trying to teach anybody, but thank you for dancing with me verbally about the Dhamma. It's always fun. And thank you, everybody. I hope you all are well, happy, comfortable, and peaceful. and may you all live with ease. Suki Hotu.